In this video, we're talking all about the Walt Disney Company Q2 earnings. There's a lot to dive into in regards to the parks, in regards to Disney Plus, just a ton of stuff. We're going to break it all down up next. Hey everybody, welcome aboard to another episode of Orange Grove 55. I brought my brothers, my compadres, my colleagues with me today to talk all about the Walt Disney Company quarterly earnings. There was a lot of good in this report, some bad, and some kind of neutral. It's really been a mixed bag, but we're going to dive into all those details. But before we get started, let's introduce my fantastic panel. First up, Mr. Vashguy, host of Freshly Squeezed. Dre, how are you today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing quite good. Yes, this is an interesting quarter, very fascinating quarter. It's a quarter that's filled with all kinds of stuff. Let me just put it that way, and we're going to be here to break it all down for you. But before we get to that, if you want to go ahead and interact with me, you can do so on Twitter. That's right down there, just like it's spelled. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed. Your source for juice, news, and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. There you go, right there. We'll keep it simple today.
And down below, we have Mr. DFM23, George. How you doing today, George?
I'm doing good. It's going to be an interesting topic. I can't wait to discuss it with you fellas. I think a lot of people have been waiting for this to come about, and what better way to have this discussion on Orange Grove 55. But if you want to interact with me or see me, you can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. The interaction part comes on Twitter at Disney George. And of course, you can find me on Orange Grove 55's channel with Citrus Corner.
Perfect. All right, let's get down to business. So the first kind of topic of today's conversation is going to be Disney Plus. Disney Plus. Now, look, leading up to this quarterly earnings, that was the talk of the town. All eyes were on Disney Plus. How are the subs? Are they going to make gains? There was a lot of factors. Boycotts, various things that were in play here. Everyone's really focusing on those subs. Dre, I'll start with you. Overall thoughts on the numbers for Disney Plus for this quarter?
Numbers look healthy. I believe they gained, 8 million, 8 million plus new subs, estimated to be about 5 million. So that was pretty good right there. Pretty good. And on the surface, everything looks great. It's when you get slightly below the surface that things become a little bit more apparent. You hear a lot at these conference calls about ARPU, and that's average. It's average revenue per unit. In this case, user, and that's a significant stat line. And when you look at the ARPU of some of the kind of the American territories or the UK, that ARPU is pretty high. But when you look at some of their other markets, that goes down considerably. And as we learned, a lot of that growth, I think about 50% of it, end up being from India, which if you look at the ARPU on that, you're looking at about maybe 76 cents per month. So that's not quite as valuable in terms of profit or revenue generation than maybe some of the American territories would be. It's very similar to guests at maybe Disneyland, right? You have your annual pass holders, your domestic tourists, and your international tourists. Obviously, your international tourists are going to be the most profitable. But, your annual pass holder, it sure might be profitable, with a year's worth of visits, but maybe per visit, maybe not as profitable as some of those bigger spenders, those whales, right? And that's what we're kind of seeing here. And that right there, a lot has been said on subscriptions and kind of price per subscriber and so forth. But I thought that was an interesting takeaway from this whole thing.
Well, let me ask you a question, Dre. When you say how much was it per month in India?
76 cents. That was for their Hotstar service.
Hotstar, which is like their equivalent of like Disney Plus, right? Basically.
Correct.
Okay. So couldn't the argument be made though? Because I've seen this argument made. Oh, well, India, man, they only pay like $6 a year for Disney Plus. So that kind of like minimizes like the Disney Plus subscriber count. Okay, fair enough. But couldn't you make the argument that kind of every business sort of, in order to gain market share, has this kind of same tactic? We've seen the same thing with Universal. They don't have lower prices at the Universal parks because they're doing you a solid. They have the lower prices because they're trying to gain market share. So when Disney's trying to gain market share for Disney Plus, isn't that kind of like the right way to go about it? You kind of want to market this stuff the cheapest as possible to kind of gain a footing. Once you get that footing, though, then you can start to kind of creep up those prices. It sounds dirty, but that's kind of what all businesses kind of do, no?
Oh, no, absolutely. And you price per market. So obviously, that's why Disneyland prices are a little bit different than Walt Disney World prices, right? You're talking about two different markets, two different coasts, and they obviously have their own prices. Absolutely 100%, no disagreement there. It's just, subscribers, and this is why I brought this up before, subscribers is only one part of the picture.
Yeah.
As we all know. And, but in terms of that market capture, Disney's been doing great on that front. Quite honestly. And it was reflected in this quarter, no matter where those subscribers come from. It was just noteworthy to bring up in order to paint the fullest picture possible. Obviously, there's no question that that revenue for their DTC will obviously will have to be adjusted to price for profitability. It's interesting because the DTC segment or the streaming segment for Disney actually lost $887 million this quarter, which was a lot more than the $290 million losses the same quarter last year. And I believe, let's see, in the last, they've lost about $1.5 billion in the last 6 months of the fiscal year. So, it's you are doing market capture. Yeah. But I think what investors want to see is going to be, when that those lost that lost revenue actual equal into positive revenue. From what we understand, in 2024, fiscal year 2024, they are on that pace to do that. It's going to be interesting to see how they pull it off. Yeah,
absolutely. Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts, man, on the Disney Plus numbers? They were estimated, like Dre was saying, they were estimated about 5. I was seeing like anywhere between 4.5 to 5 million subs. They came in about 7.9, 8 million subs. Almost doubled. What are your thoughts when you saw these numbers? Where were you at, sir?
Well, I think when it comes to Disney Plus, this was sort of the black sheep, if you will, as part of any part of these quarter earnings, because especially what happened with Netflix, everyone's eyes was on Disney. Are they going to suffer the same fate?
Yeah.
And but I actually was surprised in a good way to the fact that they were estimating 135 million and they ended up with 137.7 altogether. So that's higher than the expectation of what they were aiming for. So as you guys had mentioned, it's always best to see, even if it's a slight increase above than what your immediate goal is, at least you're above that average and not below it. But so it is a good step moving forward as far as for Disney Plus, as long as they can kind of keep keep like the people engaged in what is going to be put on the content on the streaming service, because if you end up losing people's interest, then there goes the subs, so right. I think moving forward, it's best that kind of Disney kind of keeps on their toes with that, because the streaming service right now is kind of iffy, where it can kind of be to your benefit or it could be a detrimental to the company either way. And I'm not just saying that about Disney Plus. I'm saying that about any streaming service with any company.
Yeah, it was interesting. Look, here's the thing too, and I hopefully Wall Street kind of learned its lesson a little bit with this latest Q2 earnings from Disney. Netflix is not the streaming industry. Netflix 4 or 5 years ago, yeah, absolutely, Netflix was the industry, okay? But this whole notion that like kind of Wall Street has sort of like clung on to, I mean, even recently with this last earnings, right up until Disney reported a few days ago, was like, as Netflix goes, so will Disney Plus. And that's just not the case. Look, we've seen now Disney Plus buck that trend. It not only did it have positive gains in subs, but it doubled Wall Street's expectations. We even saw it with Paramount Plus a couple of weeks ago. They also had very solid subscriber gains, right, for their streamer service. So I think that this is more a Netflix problem than a streaming problem. Look, we all knew in 2019 there was meme upon meme upon meme on the internet about how Netflix was done because Disney was getting in on this game and they're going to have Marvel and Star Wars and all this stuff. And then people seem to forget that. Like everyone sort of predicted that this would happen. Like once the big companies like Disney, Warner, Paramount, all these companies sort of pull out of Netflix, of course they're going to take a loss. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out. So it didn't happen immediately, no, because those licensing deals take a while to expire. But now those chickens have kind of come home to roost, 2 and 3 years later, and you're starting to feel the effects of Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, HBO Max. This was like kind of the inevitable, wasn't it, Dre? I mean, I don't understand why the big surprise. I just honestly, I don't.
Well, interestingly, chickens coming home to roost is very accurate. In fact, there's actually a lawsuit about this because apparently they came home to roost sooner than they let on. Initially, they were like, "Oh, everything's going great." And obviously it wasn't. And they were hemorrhaging subscribers in the background, saying, but putting up a bold face. Everything's fine, and that's why it's important for transparency. But it's interesting to see what happened with Netflix. Yeah. Obviously, the lawsuit brings out a lot of that stuff, brought forth by investors, by the way. On the basis that they maybe misrepresented, how successful Netflix was going on at that time. But, it's interesting. Netflix's content had been, to put it nicely, hadn't been quite in line with consumer expectations, and that may have been a big reason why a lot of these subscribers, decided to, cut tail, so to speak. Wow. Netflix was trying to say, it's because people are password sharing. That's not quite working across the industry. Now, I will say Netflix is more expensive than everybody else, but that's not quite accurate.
Every single streaming service has a password sharing problem. And if it was simply down to the password sharing problem, Disney Plus wouldn't have gains. Paramount Plus wouldn't have gains. Yeah, Netflix totally making excuses. And look, I'll be real with you. I like Netflix. There's a show on Netflix, Ozark. I freaking love. I love Ozark. There's a lot of stuff. Actually, I even enjoyed Bridgerton. I know. George, you would call this a chick flick. But I did. I enjoyed Bridgerton. I think it's a good show. I do. Netflix has a lot of good original programming, but the fact of the matter is it's the most expensive streamer.
Yeah.
They're bleeding out in terms of content. They have all the major studios leaving. Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot of reason to stay on board. I mean, there's a few shows like Ozark, Bridgerton, whatever, but for the most part, why am I going to pay that price for less content?
I'm one of them. I actually ended my subscription with Netflix, and just for that purpose, because there's really nothing on there that's worth the monthly price that I'd be paying. And I agree with you guys. I do feel that Netflix is sort of kind of like that main dominant, like big brother sort of thing. Like whatever happens to them, it's going to seal the fate for these other streaming services. And that's not always the case. But I wanted to ask you fellas, I thought I saw an article somewhere that Disney ended up putting out money to end agreements with other streaming services that have certain content that they can end up putting it on Disney Plus
Correct.
much sooner than what is expected.
Yes. Yeah, they had put out some cash actually towards Netflix even to end those license agreements sooner than they were scheduled to expire. So yeah, they had actually done that, and that's just to kind of consolidate, get everything back in house, and create this kind of market perception that, hey, look, listen, if you want any of the content that we produce via our studios, well, you're going to have to go to one place to actually see it on your phone or otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's smart. I mean, that's really smart. I think Disney Plus probably gained quite a few from those Netflix Marvel shows. I know I was a huge fan of those shows. I love Daredevil. I love Jessica Jones. I even liked Iron Fist. Jessica Henwick, baby. I like those shows. I thought they were really, really good. I mean, I don't know. For me, I liked them. I thought they were really gritty, and they were really fun. And it's cool to see them now on Disney Plus. That's the thing. That's the one thing with Marvel that Disney's had a real hard time with. It's like herding cats, because Marvel had deals with everybody and their mom before Disney bought them, and they've kind of had to like rein all that in, and they're trying really hard. The theme park stuff is not really happening, but in the movie end, they're slowly but surely kind of gaining that control. It's been a challenge, but I think it's smart. Look, obviously Disney has one of the most profitable IPs in their back pocket. You're going to want to have that control. And now they got the X-Men with Fox, now they got a lot of the, the Netflix stuff, and everything, because that expired. And I think slowly but surely they're kind of gaining access to it. I think it's a smart move on JPEG's part to kind of bring all that in. Spider-Man is still kind of a big question mark because Sony's involved. Yeah.
Well, and it's a good step forward with Disney using those Marvel shows and films, because especially with Doctor Strange, it definitely has, spoiler free, it has a feel to that. It has that gritty type of dark, almost slight borderline horror, if you will. So I think that if you're going to end up eventually having a film like that on Disney Plus, then you might as well should just have the whole slate.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, I want to ask you guys. I'll start with you, Dre, because this was a big dynamic leading up to this quarter, and we've talked a lot about it, like a lot of politics lately on the show. It just, hey, look, it's part of the landscape right now when it comes to Disney. It just is
very much so. Yeah,
very much. And I know a lot of people maybe don't like that. It's the reality, and we would be doing our audience a disservice if we didn't bring it up. Yeah, But there was a movement, I would say, by conservatives to sort of boycott Disney Plus, cancel your subscriptions because Disney is kind of going too woke, right?
Right.
Christopher Rufo, I believe his name is, was kind of spearheading this idea of like kind of, hey, cancel your Disney Plus, cancel your Disney Plus. There's a big movement. And honestly, leading up to the quarterly earnings, I was kind of thinking this might have a big impact. Now, 7.9 million new subs for the quarter. It doesn't feel like it had a big impact. I mean, unless Disney was going to have 10 million subs and then the boycott brought it down to 7.9, which I seriously doubt. What are your thoughts, Dre, on this whole thing? Because this is interesting, because we saw a lot of talk and chatter on, social media, on the media outlets about this D+ cancellation kind of movement. Didn't really pan out. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have some things to say on that. Two things, actually. One, I want you to do me a favor, OG.
Sure.
I want you to go ahead and open up a new browser window.
Sure. Mm-hmm. All right.
I want you to go to Google.
Right.
And I want you to type in Disney Plus boycott.
Okay, let's do it. All right. And okay.
Now look at the results.
Hold on one sec. Should I be sharing this?
No. Just, you can do it yourself.
Okay, look at the results. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I want you to give me the dates of the most recent results?
It says here how Disney found itself in the middle of a culture war. That was April 22nd. Conservatives want to cancel Disney. That was April 18th. Southern Baptists back DeSantis's war with Disney, April 29th. So a lot of stuff is April, I would say.
And when did the quarter end?
The quarter ended. When did the quarter end? Hold on one second. That's a good question. Give me one second.
I have the date right here for you, sir. April
What
2nd, 2022.
Interesting. Okay. That does change things quite a bit. Interesting. Okay. So the next quarter, we would see those results then.
Correct. Now, I will say, do I think it'll have a profound effect? I'm leaning towards no.
Yeah.
Always could, but I'm leaning towards no. But you're already kind of seeing a kind of a cultural realignment in this sector, specifically with Netflix themselves. Did you see this internal memo that they put out to their employees today?
I did. Well, you sent it to me. Do you have that on deck, by the way? I'd love to share it.
I sure do. Do you want to share the actual image itself?
Yeah. Go ahead and do you have that with you? I can go ahead and share that. No problem.
Let me go ahead and get it posted up here real fast. I do apologize.
No problem. And I just want to say while you're doing that, like that's interesting about the boycott. I do feel though, we've seen boycotts before. We saw it with Gina Carano. Didn't really pan out. I think a lot of these boycotts are kind of coming from a niche kind of perspective. I think most families are just like, hey, you know what? I got D+ because I got kids and it's something to keep them occupied while I'm cleaning the house or cooking dinner. Right. I think that's where most families are.
And that's a pretty big boycott. Like, I mean, that would be like over national type of thing, like where you have like the boycotts where you have like maybe a small group here, a small group there. But I mean, like they're talking about, you know, with household and home, you know, that's a pretty big boycott if that came into fruition for the next quarter. Right.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Dre on that. Like, I think that even the next quarter, you're not going to see much movement on that. It would take a lot. I'm telling you, these boycotts,
and it would still have to balance out because with Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out May 27th, you know, people are still dying to see that. So even if the numbers were to dip, you know, and the numbers would come back up, I still think it would balance out in the end.
Correct. Yeah, I don't think it's going to make much of an impact. Are you ready for me to share, Mr.
I am. Now, this is pretty, you know, it's pretty conservative leading article right here, just so you know. So it uses maybe some language here, but we'll go ahead and read it. Following a financial report that saw its stock price plummet 37% in late April, Netflix is now moving to adjust its culture and re-engage its frustrated audience. A new, quote, culture memo dealing with artistic expression has been sent out, and it's clearly a shot at the, quote, woke staffers who have been sandbagging the company, and in this writer's opinion. Now, these excerpts come from the Daily Wire, apparently, but here was some of the memo here. Quote, if you find it hard to support our content breadth, Netflix may not be the best place for you, the memo states, later adding that employees may be required to work on projects that they, quote, perceive to be as harmful, and if they have a hard time accepting their work assignment, they may want to consider working somewhere else. Quote, entertaining the world is an amazing opportunity and also a challenge because viewers have very different tastes and points of view. So we offer a wide variety of TV shows and movies, some of which can be provocative. End quote. The new section reads, later adding, quote, we support the artistic expression of the creators we choose to work with and that we let viewers decide what's appropriate for them versus having Netflix censor specific artists or voices. Which is kind of follow the data kind of language hearing from Netflix, just a little bit, right? It's very, very kind of interesting how you know we're kind of seeing this shift in terms of the kind of cultural language here, coming from one of the biggest DTC providers out there, and so is this going to be endemic of the entire industry? Who knows? But I thought it was really, really interesting that this actually came about so closely between their quarterly earnings report and Disney's.
Yeah, there was a big push from the left to cancel Netflix over the Dave Chappelle stuff.
Yeah.
Now look, I'll be completely honest with you. I watched that Dave Chappelle special, and it was, I don't know, and I'm probably gonna get canceled for this shit. I probably shouldn't even say this, but
well, folks, if we don't hard cut right now, then you know.
In my opinion, and look, if I'm wrong, fine, comment down below. In my opinion, that Dave Chappelle thing seemed like a love letter to his trans friend. I mean, he was obviously poking fun and joking like he does. He's a comedian. But at the end of the day, I feel like it was sort of a love letter to this person, his trans friend that he held deeply to his heart. Like he loved his friend, and it felt like it was like a love letter to him. And I don't know. I didn't see. Now again, I'm not trans. I mean, you know, I'm not seeing it from that perspective. I just didn't see the issue. I felt like it was very honorary to his friend who was trans. Okay. But now, to be fair though, we've also seen a lot of the right try to cancel Netflix. We have. There's been a lot of, Netflix is so woke, and we've seen the cancel Netflix stuff too from the right. So I'm not 100% sold on this idea that this memo is specifically targeting the left only, just because I think the right also has a kind of a stake in this. I've seen a lot of activism from the right to kind of go after Netflix too. It's too woke. It's too this, right? So I don't know. What? Oh, go ahead, Dre. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think they're taking a much more kind of centrist position. Not going one way or the other, but as the article actually, as the memo actually states, letting Netflix customers decide and dictate what content they produce going forward. I think it's very fascinating. The people who actually, attempted to rally fellow employees within the company to actually protest Netflix, those people have been subsequently fired. so if you're thinking about crossing the picket line to protest your employment at Netflix, you might want to think twice.
Yeah, George, what do you think, man? What do you think about this memo from Netflix? Kind of drawing the line, like, hey, you know what? We're gonna make content. If you don't like it, hit the road, Jack. What do you think?
Okay, well, you guys know me. Got to go balls to the wall here.
Oh, here we go.
So I do believe that, and I'm probably going to get canceled right along with you. But
you I'm in good company, George. We'll get canceled together, man. Let's go. Come on, let's go.
And then Dre will just be sitting there like, what the am I going to do now?
Listen, I've started down this path. I guess we're going to get canceled together, boys.
Yeah,
let's do it.
But I do feel that it is one, to go both ways. You can go too far right and you can go too far left. And I think that's where the cultural battle is, because everyone, and I'm specifically saying everyone, I am not saying one side or the other, are so high up intense on their high horse, so to speak, of saying, okay, well, it has to be one way or not the other, so, and for me, I'm not ashamed to say it. I will say I am an independent. However, I have my Disney Plus. I'm keeping my Disney Plus. I am going to continue to go to Disney. And a lot of people can say, well, how then can you consider yourself, you are still going to Disney if you are still keeping your Disney Plus? It's because of what society is now labeling as what is and what is not. And that to me kind of, it pisses me off. I'm just going to downright say it pisses me off. It's like, I don't have to justify myself of what my personal background beliefs are of what I want to do in my own household. So whether or not you agree with me or you disagree with me, that's fine. That's okay. That's what the world needs to see, is it's okay to be different. It's okay to have different opinions.
Correct.
It's to the fact of respect one another to your own decision. And if something doesn't work out in your household, that is good. But if it works out in mine, do not give me the third degree about it.
Right. No, 100%, brother. 100%. Look, I used to work at a long time. long time ago. Okay, I'm 42. When I was 19 years old, I used to work at a hip hop clothing store, and I worked there for about 3 years. And I had probably the best supervisor, best manager I've ever had in my life to this day when I worked at that store. His name was Julian Lowe. And right now, Julian is actually a pastor at a church in LA. Phenomenal stuff. And you can check him out, Oasis on YouTube. He does the sermons on YouTube. He's fantastic. Love Julian. But he had a great whole speech about how like his church and America in general suffers from a lot of problems. But one of the major problems in our country is thoughtism, where we literally give ourselves permission to hate someone else because they think differently. Because you know what? You don't agree with me, I hate you. You know? And he was kind of going on about how wrong it is. And I agree with that. I think that as like in fandom, especially in this Disney fandom, Star Wars fandom, all these fandoms, I think it's so important to be able to have people with a different mindset, a different opinion come to the table and discuss things, you know? It's so important. And this thoughtism that Julian was talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say this thoughtism that Julian Lowe was talking about is so relevant to today's kind of culture. You know, it's like, I'm just kind of tired of it, man. I just want everyone, like, we all don't have to agree. That's fine. We don't want a hive mind, but can we just treat each other like human beings and just be civil and respectful? Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, not a problem. And I think that's where, what the statement from Netflix was coming about is like with the censorship and everything. I personally feel that each individual streaming service should be allowed to put on the content that, is out there. And again, that's a conversation that you have as a family. You talk to your kids and you say, you know what, this is something that is not appropriate for our household. Then you do not watch it. If you want to have a disclaimer on each thing before the movie or the show starts, that is perfectly fine. Yeah. But in all actuality, I think honestly, anything should be up for grabs, so to speak, and not have to be censored or taken off and that's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah. Where are you at, Dre, with this whole thing? Before we move on to
no, I kind of agree. I mean, it's I think whether it be Disney or Netflix, they're in the business of making money, and I think they should be kind of be following kind of consumer trends and kind of understanding the temperature of the room, so to speak, when it comes to the production of their content, and kind of understanding that if you put out partisan stuff and that goes left or right, you might it might lead to some issues, especially for a company like Disney who appeals to families primarily. So it's kind of it's an interesting kind of balancing act. But I think I wholeheartedly agree with you too. We should be able to kind of talk to one another, and we shouldn't cast aspersions on other people just because of their either political or whatever belief system that they have. I think that's kind of really important. And I think there's kind of a cultural realignment, happening in major swaths of this country. It was interesting. I was looking at some polling data coming out of Georgia for their upcoming gubernatorial election, and it was interesting because families, coming out of that state, I think 2-parent households with kids were favoring Republicans up by like 20 points, which was kind of a huge margin, much larger than it had been historically. And that just kind of showed like the country's moving in various directions, and I think maybe the best policy is to kind of be in line with that movement, but also kind of produce content that appeals to the widest demographics possible.
Yeah, 100%.
Whether that be left or right.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's all. And I'm sorry. And I just have one last thing to say to my statement. And as I say, whether you are on the left or the right, one side or the other, I respect your decisions. I respect your opinions, your thoughts. All I ask is for you to respect mine. And hey, if you want to have that discussion with me, reach out to me on Twitter at Disney George. If you want to do it in person, you could buy me lunch at Carl's Jr. We'll talk.
Well, no,
yes.
And you know what? Put a finer point on this, Chapek, he gave he gave a speech recently at a university. I think University of what was it again? It was
Indiana,
right?
It was Indiana.
I
I think it was
Okay.
Indiana.
And he said there, hey, once people pass through the doors of our Magic Kingdom, the only arguments that people have is which, mountain is the best between Thunder, Splash, or Space, that kind of thing. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, hey, the fandom is really cool because it actually brings people together. These disparate people who may have not seen eye to eye on any other issue, seen eye to eye on this. And it kind of, it is kind of one of those things that kind of, brings them together and, gets people to share ideas about the fandom especially, but even some other issues. And I think Disney is a force for good in that aspect. But it's interesting because, we talked about boycotts and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Disney's it's going to be pretty bullish here in Q3. They talked about opening up in 50 new markets in Q3 and the launch by the end of the year, the launch of a new ad tier tier of the service for Disney Plus, which was pretty significant. I mean, honestly, a lot of people were kind of questioning whether or not Disney Plus and Netflix were going to go in this direction. And it looks like both of them are. And by the end of the year, we'll have ad tiers to both those services.
Let me ask you a question about the ad tier thing.
Mm.
Is the ad tier Disney Plus? Is it free and then you just watch ads, or is it still subscription based but at a much cheaper rate?
So I was kind of parsing out the verbiage that was being used in the call, and it looked like it was going to be at a much lower rate. It was going to be free, but it was going to be at a kind of an introductory rate, as I think Chapek described it. So that's kind of their way of it does two things, right? And this goes along with some of the discounting that we've seen on the park side if you're a current, Disney Plus subscriber and so forth. This is their way, I think, of, several factors, right? We're seeing inflation in the market overall, so it's kind of a hedge against that. It's also to get some kind of some liquidity, some kind of advertisement revenue going into the platform, which will be that kind of follows their kind of linear streams or some of their channels. Kind of the traditional distribution methods when you talk about ABC or Freeform or stuff like that, kind of follows that. But it's also, I think, November's coming up, and those 3 years, those 3-year subscriber buy-ins that started in November in 2019 are coming up for renewal, and I think it's all a hedge against those things to offset any losses that might be incurred from those factors.
That might be the case, yeah, because they're probably going to get a lot of people on board with that cheaper rate.
Mm.
I
but
think
they're also smart with the higher tier, because if you're someone like me, I'm willing to pay that higher tier for Disney Plus to not get the ads.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a smart move, man. It's a smart move because it brings in more subscribers because you bring in that really cheap rate, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it brings in a lot of revenue because now your streaming platform almost behaves like your cable networks,
right?
Where it's running ads. So it's a smart move. I can see why Chapek wants to do it. I can see why Netflix wants to do it. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
I know we're going to move on, but I have a question.
Yeah,
I know that there is a special going on with Verizon right now, that if you get Verizon internet service, you can get up to 12 months free with Disney Plus.
Yeah.
If you end up getting that deal within that time frame, does it lock you in before that if they start the tiering system, or does that automatically give you the lowest that includes the ads, and then you would just have to pay the difference if you don't want the ads on your streaming service?
I think we'd have to look at that deal specifically, but I believe before this ad tier service is launched, just kind of,
so more so
thinking about it logically in my head, I believe it locks you in at the premium level.
Gotcha.
I believe you might have to look at your terms and conditions, but I believe that's that's gonna how it's gonna be. Because I doubt there's language in there that says, oh yeah, we'll move you over once this new product launches. I believe it's with that.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what I have. Like when everyone's 3 year is up, I still have 1 more year because when I got the Verizon phones, it gave me that 1 year free for Disney Plus.
Okay, so in that case, probably there would be no service alteration. I would assume.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So we talked about D plus. We talked about streaming. Let's move on to. Oh, go ahead.
Two more things that I thought were really. I'm sorry. Two more things really interesting, really quick. Okay. One, talked about sports, right? And this is kind of interesting because I guess it's kind of something that's kind of tangentially related. I guess they got Joe Buck and Troy Aikman for the NFL on their ESPN side, which was a big grab from Fox. If you're at all part of this world, you know that's a big deal that they got those two broadcasters because they've been a staple there at Fox for forever. But Fox responded by getting the GOAT, Tom Brady, on a $375 million deal after he retires. So this is part of their broadcast package. So I thought that was kind of interesting that we're seeing movement on that end. I heard Chapek talking about how they were happy about the Manning brothers and, adding content to that ESPN Plus. But I thought that was very, very interesting that Tom decided to go that way because he had done part of his documentary series on ESPN Plus. So I thought that was some more stuff going on there. Number two, he talked about China. And we're pretty much the only show that's actually talked about China and how China, they got their issues, especially when it comes to content approval in their country. But we'll go and play you a clip because I thought it was really, really revealing what he said about it. Because historically, we know Bob Iger's take on it. Bob Iger's take on it has largely been, hey, look, it's good to be in business with China because to get access to their market. But Bob Chapek had something very interesting to say on the matter, and I'll play that right now.
I'm going to start with China, and the situation there has been very fluid, and as you probably guess, very complicated, both from a business standpoint and from a political standpoint. But as you know, we've got a long track record of success and a strong fan base for our brands and franchises in this market. And our most recent releases were Death on the Nile and Encanto. And we'll continue to submit our films for release. And it's worth noting, I think, though, that at the time that we're having some difficulty in getting our films in China, that Doctor Strange did extraordinary. We've just crossed $500 million in less than a week without this market. So we're pretty confident that even without China, if it were to be that we continue to have difficulties in getting titles in there, that it doesn't really preclude our success given the relatively lower take rate that we get on the box office in China than we do across the rest of the world.
Okay.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
You would have never heard that from Bob Iger.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
That was
100%.
that was some cojones right there. That's like, those are like the two matching the top of the one on his head. It's like,
That was like some freshly squeezed cojones, right?
That was like a good freshly squeezed, right? No, that's exactly what it was. And I will say, we have talked about on this show how, China is kind of, it's kind of almost like fool's gold, so to speak, because, let's be honest. Those, Chinese officials control a lot about what you produce, a lot about, what actually goes into their markets. There's been allegations of, the kind of the theft of trade secrets and so forth to, establish their industries and so forth. So it's been a very contentious issue. And we saw that, maybe Iger was like, oh yeah, I'm not as, what do you say? My confidence is kind of shaken in the Chinese market, and now we're seeing that kind of come full circle, where you have Bob Iger. I think for the best, saying, "Hey, look, we'll still pursue it, but if something happens, we're going to be okay." I thought that was a very, very fascinating thing that kind of official stance, especially in front of investors, that they're kind of pulling back from China.
Yeah, like the reassurance, the reassuring, notion that it's like he has confidence that, with or without China, the film industry, as far as with, their distribution of their movies is going to be fine.
Right.
You know, and as I said, I got to give him the credit for saying something like that, because as you said, Dre, that coming from Orange Grove, that coming from Iger,
Wouldn't never happen.
not a peep.
Would never happen.
That would never ever happen. Ever. All right,
Yeah.
let's move on
Right,
to
now.
the parks.
There you go.
The parks. So this is from WDWNT. And it says domestic Disney park guest per capita spending grew more than 40% over 2019. It says in today's Q2 2022 earnings report, CEO Bob Chapek praised the domestic parks for revenue growth and attributed the $4.9 billion revenue to, quote, strong demand with customized and personalized guest experience enhancement, end quote, i.e. Disney Genie Plus, leading to a 40% rise in per capita spending. It also grew 20% since Q1 of 2022. Dre, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the growth in regards to the park stuff, how Chapek is sort of attributing this to the Lightning Lane Genie Plus stuff, like the nickel and diming stuff that fans hate so much?
Yes, he absolutely did attribute those kind of things to their new systems that they put in place, as Chapek has worded it. But listen, I mean, if we're comparing from 2019, it's very apparent. We've kind of seen this kind of transaction kind of culture kind of, take root in many of the aspects of the parks, right? We're seeing, exclusive or premium dining packages as part of fireworks viewing. We're seeing, services like Genie Plus, Lightning Lane, and so forth. This is kind of, where Chapek wants to go here. I mean, he really is all about that yield, both from, this kind of per cap or this kind of per person spending that we see at the parks, and also from even, kind of operating costs like labor and so forth. I think this is a trend that we're going to see continue here. Let's see. He had an interesting take on this, though. There were two clips that I wanted to play, but I'll start with this one right here. This one's going to be when asked about some of these services and whether or not they'll be staying and so forth. So let me go ahead and find that right now.
Okay, so we continue to see really strong demand, and we're encouraged by the trends that we're seeing. Particularly as we're going to get some improvements to international visitation, but we're controlling our attendance, as Christine mentioned in her comments, using our reservation system to optimize the guest experience. But that domestic yield strategy, and we're also seeing it in Paris, is really exceeding our expectations. If you remember last quarter, we mentioned that we had some high hopes for it, but we were seeing well above what we had anticipated. Well, I'm happy to say that in Q2, we're even, as you say, we're lapping those numbers again even higher. So we're very, very encouraged by the continuation of the trends that we're seeing in terms of the number of people, for example, that sign up for Genie Plus the willingness, to come to our parks with our balanced reservation system, which really helps us, sort of manage our price per day, if you will. So that domestic yield strategy has really structurally allowed us to increase that per capita spending meaningfully without having to rely solely on raising ticket prices, and we don't see any end in sight for that.
So that was a very interesting couple of quotes there. One, he'd mentioned how this kind of, this kind of reservation system actually helps their price per day. And I think he means that in two ways. One is obviously the price for people to pay per day, because they have this kind of tiered kind of pricing schedule that they have out. But also, too, I think he was talking about operating costs and how they could better control that. On the other side, we heard that that their yield strategy also was a hedge against, constantly upping the price in terms of the cost of entry. And I thought that was really kind of interesting. We don't really kind of think of these things, but as a byproduct of, making revenue in the parks, one could say that by making them more attainable to actually actually take part in those services, you could actually help in terms of keeping those costs, the price per entry down. I thought it was kind of fascinating how he worded that and how he put that, because I had never really heard that before.
Well, the interesting thing too is, like, as fans, I go through, we go through it every year with fandom, right? Every year, Disney raises the prices on tickets and annual passes, right? And the fandom goes nuts. Oh my God, they're raising the prices of the APs, yada, yada, yada. And there's always this kind of dialogue amongst the fan community about, like, isn't there anything else they can do to sort of prevent, like, the constant, like, yearly price hikes? Mm-hmm. So now they have a solution to that. Not a total solution. I'm not saying they're never going to hike prices again. I'm not saying that. But they have a way now through the reservation system to mitigate those price hikes, to manage costs. And fans are still fucking bitching about it. They don't want the reservation system. They don't want price hikes. They want $1 billion e-ticket every 2 years. But when they get to the park, they don't want any crowds, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like,
and limit their spending when they're there.
I really don't. I'm done. I really don't know what to say.
Yeah, and we see this, kind of across this winter. I mean, listen. They will still hike up prices. I mean, it's going to happen, and of course they're going to have to adjust pricing internally because of inflationary issues, which Christine Waistlines McCarthy talks about, which we will get to. But look, I mean, it's him kind of saying, hey, we don't have to solely rely on this method of making money. We can monetize the parks in other ways. I thought it was kind of fascinating. Even the reservation system plays a part in that. And it was just kind of interesting to kind of hear him say it and hear his mindset. But George, what do you think about all this?
Well, first I have to say, especially like with the spending, the 40%, gross of like with Genie Plus and the Lightning Lanes and what have you, I do have to say this in the sense that, of course, that percentage is going to be up, because when you don't give any guest an option to say, hey, you know what, just go in a regular line and wait 20 to 30 minutes. No, you wait in a 2 to 3 hour long line, or you pay this premium and you can get on within 5 to 10 minutes. So obviously that number and percentage is going to be up for the spending of Genie Plus, because people are, especially if you're a family, going down for that once in a lifetime vacation, you're going to spend as much as possible to try to get every single thing in as you possibly can. Having said that, I do agree with you fellas. I feel that, no matter what anyone is going to say, especially since he talked about the international travelers that aren't even there yet. And we're already seeing a bottlenecked, parks day for day, the crowd shoulder to shoulder, and that's with the reservation system. So in a sense, I can't really foresee how it would really look without it. And I did find it interesting that, how that they can not even control of how many people go in per day, but how much is actually being spent per day. That I find was fascinating, as you've mentioned, Dre.
Yeah. And listen, it's a kind of a fascinating discussion, because, you look at, the international visitors are still they're still not a big player. Previously, I believe, at least Walt Disney World's concerned, I think they made up 15 to 20% of annual attendance, which is a huge number, right? So we still haven't, quite factored that in. We're going to be seeing some cost adjustments as time goes on. Obviously, we're going to continue to see this monetization, but I kind of look at it as maybe the yield management has gone a little bit too far. I mean, I hear a lot of people when they go to the parks right now, it's more crowded than I've ever seen, and it's not just the crowds, not just the people, not just the bodies, but it's also about how efficiently those bodies are actually handled. We're seeing a lot of people take part in the Genie Plus system, but that's causing these lines that, previously used to move, now not move, as these ratios increase from, the 81 kind of ratio to, 100 to 1 or 110 to 1 or 120.
Because it's basically Disney's goal.
Standby.
They want you to spend that. They want you to buy into Genie Plus. Otherwise, they wouldn't have it.
Right. But I think that's getting them into trouble. I mean, I'm hearing internally
absolutely.
that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Internally, the surveys are horrific for Genie Plus. I mean, people are kind of really upset about the service and how it's working and so forth.
And that plays into the argument when they say, okay, you bitch and complain about, Genie Plus, then why do you buy into it? Well, it's to the notion of,
like you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you don't necessarily have to. I've never bought Genie Plus.
Well, I mean, it's more so to the people that are going on the vacations. I think for people like us that we go so often that it doesn't really bother us. And I think that's where, again, this is where the company is leaning more towards the vacationers rather than the locals or people that go very frequent.
Well, when they mentioned that in the, I think Chapek mentioned that. I mean, implied that where like Walt Disney World guests spend more money than Disneyland guests.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of the, we've talked about it on the show many, many times how Disneyland, you're talking about 75% of annual visitation being made up by mostly locals, but Walt Disney World, that ratio is completely skewed. 15 to 20% international tourists. I have to assume that domestic tourists probably 50, maybe 60%, and the rest being APs. I mean, I would probably see that. And when you're talking about a tourist who might be there for once every 5 years, once every 10 years, or once in a lifetime, they're going to be spending more money. And when you tell them, hey, look, listen, if you want to get the max out of your vacation, well, you better add on this Genie Plus service. I mean, that's $15 per ticket per day. I mean, when you're spending $6,000 just to be down there sometimes because of air travel, there's no question there. And that's why I think for Walt Disney World, they might benefit. I think everybody might benefit if this service was maybe a little bit more than it is right now. I think it's just too accessible. It's too low. And when you're seeing, 30% adoption rates, maybe even more than that, maybe even 50% adoption rates, that is way too high for this service. I think it should be, a much higher price, in order to make a better guest experience, both for the people who actually buy into Genie Plus and the people who are waiting in standby.
So do you think, from what you're saying, like especially for Walt Disney World, that to kind of limit that down, that if you are actually maybe staying on property, like you're staying at a resort hotel and, depending on like the different tiers of how much you're spending per night at the hotel, that could kind of give you like the complimentary of Genie Plus, so to speak, like as opposed to just someone coming in per day. Is that what I'm understanding? Like, are you saying like limit the amount of people that can use it per day, not necessarily how many people come through the turnstiles?
Correct. So you can limit it in two ways. One, you can have a hard cap, or two, you can actually limit it by pricing. Right. So right now, demand is just way too high, and supply is very low. So usually you would take that and say, well, either you have a hard cap or you just max it. You really kind of price it to meet that demand. And I think that's what they want to do. That's what they're going to have to do eventually. I think maybe you can give this service, as part of like maybe a deluxe resort stay, but any lower than that, you really get into some dicey territory. I think it, think of it this way, right? We heard this about the reservation system and people talked about it where, and I believe OG, you've hit on this before in the past, where if you charge double but have half the guests, you're still making the same revenue, right?
Right.
You can kind of apply that thinking where, because you're going to have to raise this price, less people will be on it, but your revenue might be the same. But overall, when you survey everybody's having a better time because the standby is moving far more efficiently, and because less people are on the actual service, people who get it have a better experience.
I would be okay with that. I'd rather pay a higher price for Genie Plus if I was going to use it than a lower price and have everyone and their grandma using it where they just back the lines up. And I'd rather, use it as an express, then you're basically getting your money's worth. But Disney is still capitalizing on that revenue either way that they were to use it. Now, because I know I looked at the wait times periodically between both resorts and everything, and I have seen Disneyland have like high wait times, especially for certain attractions, Radiator Springs Racers, Web Slingers, Mission Breakout, but I've not seen the wait times compared to Walt Disney World. Like, Tower of Terror, 150 minutes. Rock and Roller Coaster, 90 minutes. I've never seen that ride go beyond 40 minutes. And now it's almost hitting like a 2-hour wait And so for me, with Genie Plus, this is where I feel like that Disney is kind of taking their advantage point, because they know that people, when they look at that number, they're going to say, oh, I'm not waiting in 150-minute wait time for a 2-minute ride. So it's okay, take my $15.
Well, and that kind of gets into some questionable territory. Now, I'm not accusing them of doing anything shady. I'm not saying that. But if, and this is a huge if, right? If they're manipulating the wait times to funnel people into their paid service, they're getting into some legal territory. In my opinion, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that can open themselves up legally, because that seems kind of sketchy, in my opinion.
Well, it's funny that you actually bring that up, OG, because I'm actually going to purposely do that. I'm going to go to a park and find the highest wait time for a popular attraction, and I'm going to start the timer. I'm actually going to sacrifice a little bit of my time to wait in this line, and I'm going to start the timer, and I want to see how accurate it is. I mean, if it comes close, it may not have to hit like right on that number, but if it's close to it, then fine. But I mean, like if it's like an hour and a half difference, then you're kind of messing with the system, and you're giving a false positive to the guests.
And this is something that we touched on the show before. I know when the service was announced, I mean, my reservations about it, kind of centered around the fact that the incentivization on Disney's end is slightly skewed now that you are attempting to get people into the service, because where does that end? It's like, this attraction does $1,500 an hour. What if it did $1,300 an hour and pumped up those, wait times accordingly? Well, now you might get into a situation where you pumping up those wait times either artificially or organically, because a piece of the efficiency is missing from that attraction, now might persuade people to actually buy that service, which is why the service actually tells you, hey, don't use wait times as part of your reasoning for actually buying this service. You don't want to do that. And I think that's the legal safeguards that they put in place. Whether or not it'll stand up in court, I'm not really sure. But this kind of perverse incentive to kind of get people onto the service, I think it's missed a little bit. I think they would do much better off if the service was actually more expensive, and providing a good service for people who are on it and for the people on the outside, and restore maximum efficiency to these attractions, just as a basic principle. I think they would be doing themselves a much better service, and their guests.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, speaking of this whole situation with the parks, there's a certain lawsuit going on. I don't think it's fully class action yet. I believe it's potentially a class action. Correct. For the Magic Key, the blockout dates. And for those of you not aware at home, basically a Magic Key holder is suing Disney, right? Because when they bought their Magic Key, they bought it with the idea, with the mindset that they didn't have any blockout dates. But with the reservation system, it creates kind of a pseudo blockout calendar, because if you try to reserve a day that's not available, that's a blockout date.
Right.
So, Dre, if you can kind of set the table in regards to the newest developments, we'll kind of break this down, talk about it.
This is interesting. So, I was trying to keep an eye on this, and apparently I didn't do my due diligence, because Dusty Sage from Mice Chat actually had a write up about some of the updates surrounding this lawsuit. So I'll go ahead and read what they put out. They said the case continues to make its way through California and federal court systems. In the U.S. District Court, Central District of California, a judge recently responded to Disney's motion to dismiss the case. The judge did approve dismissing parts of the case, but not others. That means that the case will continue, at least on some of the claims. The portions of the original complaint that will continue are the allegations of breach of contract and demands for legal remedies pursuant to the California Consumer Legal Remedies Act, which provides consumers with protection against false advertising, fraud, and other unfair business practices. We found it very interesting that the judge said that the following in regards to the breach of contract claim. And the judge says this: the court finds that plaintiff has adequately pled facts supporting how a reasonable consumer may be deceived by the advertisement, which states, quote, no blockout dates. They say here, unless this case is settled or resolved soon, that could result in Disney rethinking the entire Magic Key program, which, from what I understand, they are already rethinking the program internally, but that's another story, and likely changing the rules, language, and other benefits of any passport-style system going forward. So it is a kind of a very interesting developing situation. We're still going to have to see what arises out of this, but we're already seeing fundamental changes. It was not by accident that on around the time that this case was actually filed, we started seeing changes to the buckets as they were distributed. Not much in Walt Disney World, but in Disneyland especially. As you'll remember, the latter half of 2021, people were complaining about not being able to get regular access to the parks, specifically in the months of October, November, and December, where it was just blocked out for months at a time and nobody could actually get access. And now we're seeing that kind of change and the prioritization put on annual pass holders or Magic Key holders as opposed to ticket holders, which is unfortunate for ticket holders, myself included, because it's kind of hard to get dates. But the reality is, I think they want to put themselves in the best standing while this lawsuit is actually taking place.
Well, and the issue too, and like I'm a local, and I'm constantly arguing for the ticket holders because here's the thing: if Disney would allow the Magic Key holders to kind of run roughshod, not have a reservation system, and just go whenever they want, like they want. It hinders the experience for people that are going for that once in a lifetime visit or that once in every decade visit. And as a Disney fan, look, as a local, I don't support that. The locals issue has been a major problem here in California for a long time. I've seen for over a decade Mice Chat talk about rumors about how Disney wants to revamp this program because the local annual pass holder population is just out of control. I honestly, and I know this is not unpopular, but I commend Disney for trying to rein that in. I do. And now they're getting a ton of shit for it. And now Magic Key holders are suing. And now we're going to go back to the same fucking problems we had before, where the Magic Keys run roughshod over everything. And that leaves all the tourists, all the out-of-staters, all the day ticketers out in the cold, in the dust. I don't know, man. I don't like that. I want to see a better balance. And I think that's what Disney was trying to do when they were doing the different buckets. We're trying to get more of these once-in-a-lifetimers in there. Once you start to kind of combine the buckets and allow these Magic Keys to kind of do what they want, they're going to run through the system and squeeze other people out. They just are. And it's unfortunate. You have that family from Germany that's never gone. You have that family from Japan that's never been. And they're squeezed out because the Magic Key holder that needs to go for the 4th time this week to get the new popcorn bucket needs their spot in the park.
I've seen this. I've seen it personally. And
it's not even just the locals. It's also the local. Here we go. I'm going to get canceled again. But it's the local vloggers. And I'm not just saying this. I'm saying this on both coasts too, because you have these people that are going in for 1 or 2 hours and they're using Disney as their own platform to kind of use it as a quote unquote job to get paid through YouTube or whatever source that they're getting paid. So it's almost like to the sense of, if you take away that payment of theirs, are they really going to go in as many times as they are? No, because they use that as their job. So in order for them to get paid, they have to go in, so to speak, and spend the time. But why don't they really want to spend no money? Because they're using that kind of as like a brick and mortar, so to speak, to say, hey, I'm getting paid for this just to kind of showcase this to you on my YouTube channel. And it's like, I'm not buying anything. I'm not spending anything, but I'm just here just to show you a run so I can get paid. And it's not me knocking the vloggers. It's just the way that it is.
Well, and George, you bring up a great point. Look, as much as people complain about the prices of these Magic Keys, the most expensive Magic Key is $1,400, which sounds like a lot of money. And it is. It's a lot of money for me. I know that, Yeah. But here's the thing. With the price of tickets at Disneyland Resort, park hoppers, what have you. The $1,400 Magic Key, if you go like 5 or 6 times, you've paid for that pass. And the way Magic Key holders frequent the park, it's like a lifestyle. It doesn't take that long for you to pay for that pass. Month or two, maybe, for most pass holders, let's be honest. And then every subsequent visit after that, Disney's losing money on you because, let's be honest, a lot of Magic Key holders, including myself, you don't go to the parks and spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. No, you go to the parks, you drop in, you get the Main Street Electrical Parade bucket, or you go in, you get your sipper, the newest sipper. You go in, you have lunch at Carthay, and you leave, and that's it. You spend maybe $100 the whole day, and then you took that spot for somebody that could have been there from Japan for that once in a lifetime visit. It's just, I don't know, man. It just rubs me the wrong way. It really, really does. And I know a lot of key holders, they get mad at me for saying this every time I make a video on this, but that's just how I feel. I'm going to be honest with you guys.
There are a bunch of key holders.
And they all do it while wearing their damn Spirit jerseys. Am I right, OG? No.
Yes,
See, on the topic of being canceled,
there's no turning back now.
that's how it is, right? No, look, listen. I mean, listen, I'm sympathetic to the annual pass holders. I really am.
Yeah.
Right? I was an annual pass holder for a long, long time until even they priced me out, where it was just like, you know what? I just can't justify this price anymore. And that was some years ago. So I'm sympathetic to it. And look, I had heard for a long, long time that, Disney was going to rein it in one way or another. It was either going to be with a hard cap, which, right. Good luck making that equitable for everybody, right? Or it was going to be priced so high that nobody was going to be able to afford it. Credit to Disney that they actually try to find a way to actually, rebalance this whole equation. But I do also believe that they kind of did it the wrong way. They should have modeled this a little bit more accurately. They should have looked at this a little bit more closely and tried to determine a way where you could do it, not only not to get you in legal trouble, but to do it in a way that maybe didn't cause so much contention. And honestly, that's a really hard thing to do, and it all kind of stems back to the fact that the monthly payments, we talked about accessibility when it came to Genie Plus. I mean, when you make these products as accessible as you do, you get into some other, you create some other problems that maybe you weren't intending. And I think a lot of these problems stem from those monthly payments. If people were forced to, pay large sums for this up front, maybe we don't see this kind of problem that we've been seeing with the annual pass holder population when Disneyland's concerned.
Well, let me ask you guys. Go ahead, George. You go first.
No, I just wanted to just say really quick, and I'm actually an annual pass holder to both coasts. I have the Incredit Pass for Walt Disney World, and I have the Dream Key for Disneyland. So yes, I'm a keyhole. So, but it's like, at least I know to the fact that I can use my annual pass and use it how it's supposed to be used. I'm not using the annual pass for, okay, I'm going in for an hour. I'm taking somebody else's spot that could be there the whole entire day. And I'm not even saying about spending for, merchandise.
Keyhole alert, baby.
It's a trap.
There you go.
But, in all actuality, it's to the fact that, I like to be there in the park because I want to be in the park. I want to be there as long as I possibly can. I don't want to take, if I'm going to go, I want to utilize that. I don't want to be there just for an hour and take somebody else's spot who may not have been there in a while, or it's their very first time. Because I remember my first time at Disneyland. It was one of the most memorable experiences ever. And I wouldn't dare to try to take that away from somebody else's first time experience.
And it's a tough situation that they've created for themselves too, because I've seen vloggers come in there for only an hour and bring their own lunch, and it's like it's like now with these hard caps in place, you just think back, it's like, man, you've denied somebody access, and I've seen those people who are denied. I've seen those people. I've looked them straight in the face where they've come from, in some cases, Japan, but like Canada and so forth, where it's just like, we're here, we're in this state, we're right next to this park, we'd love to go more, but we can't, and it's really kind of a hard thing. And hopefully Disney finds a solution somewhere. But the current system as it now stands, I don't think is working out quite the way they anticipated, and quite the way we anticipated.
Let me ask you guys a question, and this is going to sound kind of maybe a little sleazy. I don't know, but I think it's a valid question to ask.
Well, it hasn't stopped us before.
Right? Exactly. You know what? Fuck it. Let's just go with it. Right? Okay. So you're going to drop as a consumer, right? You're going into the parks. You're going to spend $1,400 on a Magic Key, right? Because this relates to the Magic Key lawsuit, right?
Sure.
You're going to walk up. You're going to spend You're going to drop $1,400, whether that be all in up front or whether that be monthly, whatever. It's still $1,400. Is it not your obligation as a consumer to do your homework a little bit and to kind of understand what you're getting into before you sign that paperwork? Like, look, I bought a car back in 2017, right? I had to know what all my rates were before I signed the dotted line. Like, once I walk away and I sign it, I can't go back like a year later and go, wait a minute, man. I didn't know I was paying $400 a month. I didn't, you can't do that. That's not how like life works. So it's like, isn't it on kind of the onus on the consumer a little bit? I know this is unpopular, but a little bit to kind of do their homework and kind of look what you're signing up for. It was no secret leading up to the Magic Key rollout that reservations were a factor. I don't think anyone, this was not out of the blue. I mean, they made it very fucking clear. Reservations were so like. Isn't it your responsibility when you're dropping that kind of money, though, to do a little homework and go, okay, if I'm going to spend this, does that mean I get actual full access, or like the reservations? Is that going to block me? And kind of do your homework. I know that sounds kind of bad, but it's like, doesn't that kind of apply? I do the same homework when I'm buying a car, when I'm buying any big purchase. I do my homework. That's part of the deal, no?
Now, look, I don't disagree with you. Okay, and look, I was on this show when the Magic Key program debuted. I was on this show saying, give it like 3 months or something to that effect, right? I was like,
you
hey,
did. You were the only one doing that, because everyone else, every YouTube channel and everything was like, oh yeah, I can't wait, just buy it. And you were the only one sounding alarm. And I give you credit for that.
Because I was, I was saying, I was like, we don't know how a system like this could affect Disneyland Resort. We've seen how it can affect Walt Disney World, and sometimes to detrimental effect. But I was like, hey, listen, guys, let's just see how they do this. Right. But unfortunately, a lot of people didn't. And I'll say this, okay? The blackout language, yeah, I mean, that's a problem. But the lawsuit actually goes into this and explains this pretty well. In saying that it was predicated on capacity, right? It's subject to capacity. And the person who was actually buying it was under the impression that that was total capacity, that everybody would share the same bucket. When in fact, Disney adjusts those buckets dynamically without telling either consumer, whether they be ticket holders or annual pass holders, what that ratio is actually going to end up being. And as we've seen, that ratio that Disney controls has a lot of variance and a lot of sway, right? But that wasn't listed in the terms and conditions, what those ratios were going to be, and how it wasn't going to be predicated on overall capacity, but that these buckets were actually going to be implemented. Obviously, the indicators were out there for Walt Disney World, but nobody actually knew how this was all going to play out, which is why I was telling people, hey, look, maybe slow your roll. But a lot of people bought into a system that they didn't necessarily... They had an impression about how much access they were going to get, not understanding how much access they were going to end up getting.
Right. Now, is this Magic Key holder the only one that came forward to pursue this lawsuit? Just one person?
From what I understand, yes. But that's also why they made the class action, so that other Magic Key holders could join her when that class action status was approved.
Okay.
Has it been approved for class action yet or not yet?
From what I understand, it has not. It just survived the motion for dismissal.
That's
Got
interesting that it moved forward. Like when you look at the picture, the big picture, it's just like you would think, oh, a judge is going to throw this out, with the black and white on there. But I guess something in there, even the judge noticed something to keep it going.
In Vegas, they give you the odds, right? What the odds of your chance of winning are with a lot of these things. If Disney were to be transparent and to let you know what those ratios were, hard percentages, and maybe even the numbers involved, right? We see a calendar slot available. If that had a number of like, hey, there's only 150 slots left, join in, maybe people might be perceiving this a little bit differently. But honestly, Disney hasn't been the most forthcoming with that information.
See, but that
creates some legal liability potentially.
Right. See, but on my end, I didn't even really read all the black and white, and I still understood.
I read those terms of service, every single line on the day it was actually announced.
But I mean, like, I understood.
And that's why you're producer Dre. That's why you're producer Dre.
Well, that's one of the reasons, sure.
Because Dre, my dumbass would be like, fucking sign it, dude, fuck it.
But like I didn't even like read all the terms and conditions, everything. I just bought the damn thing because I wanted the highest tier to go to Disneyland. But I still, in a sense, kind of understood the notion that when you're going to tie something like this, and of course, I had you on the side of my ear saying, make sure you know what you're doing, before you actually do it, But right. I kind of already put it in my mind that if you already had something of a reservation system and you're going to tie it into an annual pass, it has to be some sort of contributing factor as if you had a regular base ticket.
Yes, and here's the other thing that I kind of want to bring up, because let's go back. Let's rewind to pre-Pandy, before reservations, before the dark times,
before the Magic
Keys, right? When people could just buy an annual pass, right?
Before we landed in the Game of Thrones.
Exactly. Yeah. How transparent, though, was Disney when it came to capacity? Like, does the average guest know what the capacity was? Because there was always a capacity issue, right? Sure. There's always a chance, like with the 60th, happened quite often, that you'd get to the front gates and it was shut down because it was full.
Yeah.
When you bought an annual pass in 2015, did you know the capacity numbers? So that's what I'm saying. Like, why is it expected now to have?
Right. Well, people were basing that off of old numbers, though.
Wait. You have that question. You have Dre, and then you have me. We're both going to have two different answers on that question.
I'll go with Dre first, and then we'll go to you, George. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to take your slot, George. I do apologize. I'm only stepping in for a couple minutes. Okay.
You could
look. I think a lot of people were, and I've heard this before from Magic Key holders, where it was like, hey, I expected a level of access in terms of capacity, because back in their mind, they're thinking, well, wait a minute, the park only ran to capacity a couple of times a year, being Christmas and some high-profile events like you state, OG. So they come in with this kind of foreknowledge. But not realizing that capacity had completely swung and that there were going to be multiple buckets placed. So I think that's where the kind of disparity comes from. But go ahead, George. What were we going to say?
Oh, no. I was just going to say, to divert what OG was asking, back in 2015, did you focus on the number of people of what hit capacity? Like, has it crossed your mind to read that?
Back in 2015 to understand those capacity, the hard numbers.
Any time prior the pre-Pandy, like, have you ever did your homework and focus on those numbers of what makes a cap day at a Disney park?
Oh yeah, well, because
that's what I'm saying.
Well, because I'm insane.
I didn't do shit. That's what I mean. That's like.
Because look, listen. I mean, my personal passion when it came into the parks was operational data. How much does this attraction actually do guests per hour? What is the total capacity in terms of all their eateries and all their attractions and so forth, and how that contributes to it and stuff like that. That was my passion. So So I knew those numbers.
Right. And
But
that's
everybody else
that's-
didn't,
that-
and
right,
we didn't
right,
understand them
that's
when
what
the
I
parks
meant.
reopened.
And that's what I meant by OG's question. You and I are going to have two totally different answers to that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will
and,
say,
and that's why I love Dre, because he dived in. Like, I'm not that guy. I don't dive into the numbers, and he does, and that's why.
And that's what I was saying. Like he'll dissect everything. It was like this to the hour, to the minute, to this number, to the fourth power of this, and I'm just like sitting there, like I couldn't give two fucks back then.
George, I think you were there when we were in the Space Mountain queue, and I was timing out dispatch times.
Yes.
Like, ooh, they're like 20 seconds, 21 seconds. Oh, you gotta get faster because this thing is gonna back up.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That's what I did. So for me, like, yeah, and that's why
I enjoy
partially,
it. Like, I just sit back and I just watch you do your thing, and it's just like it's amazing.
yeah, right.
And that's Dre. I just feel like, for like the average family just buying these passes, they're not going to do all that homework,
Yeah.
And I just feel like they should, maybe not to that degree, but like they should, like when you're paying a lot of money like this, $1,400, this is a lot of money to spend, even if you're not paying all.
And that's just for
front.
one. That's just for one pass.
That's
Right.
for one. I mean, that's a lot of money, and you should definitely like maybe read a little bit as to what you're getting into before you sign. And I think a lot of people didn't do that. Obviously, the person that is doing this lawsuit didn't read it, it just, I don't know. Because the person even admits, from what I understand, like she knew that there was the reservation system was like a caveat, but she didn't think it applied to her, I guess, because
no blackout dates.
Right, because she had the most expensive thing. But it's like, you got to do your homework, If you're gonna go buy a car, you got to read the details. but can't just sign it and fucking walk away. Like,
well,
you got to read it.
Well, go ahead, George. I think you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say. Well, no. Do your point, because I've got something part of the discussion, but it's probably going to segue into something else. So,
yeah, well, I mean, this is partially why Disney wants to do business in Florida, right? Or at least they did. But because California has some pretty rigid anti-consumer or pro-consumer or consumer protections in place in that state, and that that can allow for lawsuits to actually take place like this. Now, look, I agree with you. I think you do have to do a little bit of due diligence, but I will say for her, on her side a little bit. Well, apparently they had capacity to spare, didn't they? Because they adjusted those ratios after, didn't they?
Perfect. Now, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because that's what I was just going to get into.
Sure.
Now, to OG's question before, I never really paid attention to what the cap was in each park, but I have noticed when they said, hey, the Magic Kingdom is at full capacity today, maybe something was going on. It might have been like an event or what have you, or during the holidays.
Sure.
But I never really thought nothing of it. Now you have to look at like what the cap is every single day, no matter what time of year it is. But is it just me, and I may be ignorant to the fact of that, again, not really paid attention to it, but pre-Pandy, before the reservation system, it was crowded, but I've never seen it this crowded with the reservation system, but yet they're saying that they're not at full capacity to what it was pre-Pandy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was at the parks. I can tell you exactly when, too, because we took pictures. Let me tell you when. I wasn't at Walt Disney World, though, but I was at Disneyland on, let me tell you what day. I can tell you the exact day. On April 23rd. So not too long ago. Not too long. A few weeks ago. It was busy, but I don't think it was the busiest I've ever seen it.
Right.
I mean, it was busy. Yeah, it was robust. Hey, here we go. Hold
robust.
On.
There
I gotta
you go.
drop it.
I was wanting to get that drop from Christina or Christine Wastelands McCarthy on the quarterly earnings call, but I will get that drop, but I just don't have it today. Yes. Look, I'll say this about that whole thing. It's obviously different at Walt Disney World and Disneyland.
Yeah.
I mean, did I say that correctly? I mean, like, am I...
No, you're okay, but yeah. And,
no, I mean, I did say that correctly, like of how I was trying to describe it.
I think you did. And I think two things. One is when you talk about overall capacity, right? You're talking about you're talking about the theoretical capacity, but a lot of that's contingent on the services they have available. So right now, yeah, of course, they're not at full capacity yet because all those services aren't quite available as they were back in the day. The Hyperion's closed, for example. Red Car Charlie's coming online, by the way. Shout out to OG about that. We will get into that at an upcoming date. But, those are the kind of things holding it back. But this is why I brought it up previous in the show. It's not just about bodies. It's about efficiency. And, this is my big problem with their extraordinary yield management practices, because it is, and part of this is labor, and I have a clip about that, but a lot of it is how efficiently they're actually dealing with those people. How long is that line going to be at Coke Corner or Refreshment Corner or whatever? Or I believe it's Casey's for you guys.
Yes.
How long is that line going to be in Space Mountain? Part of that is just how efficiently they're dealing with those people, giving you the perception that it's busier than it's ever been. Because it's not just about bodies; it's about how long am I standing in this line. When you have less rockets, going through the mountain, right? And part of that is going to be, some of the practices to get people on Genie Plus, but some of that is also too a lack of maintenance workers to get all of those rockets all, ready for the day to actually, take their turns on the mountain. When it comes to the actual, cast members in play right there, if you have a limited amount of staff, maybe they're not as efficient as, to get those dispatch times the lowest they can actually be. All those things create the perception that there's more people in the parks, when really it's not necessarily just about people, it's about the efficiency. And that's what's really hurting right now. That's what's hurting that guest experience. And I think the two biggest ways you kind of mitigate these problems is, one, you got to staff up. Obviously, there's labor shortages going on across the entire, United States, especially in their industry with, Universal and SeaWorld raising wages, but they're not necessarily doing that. Again, Wastelands McCarthy talks about that. And two, the other thing is this Genie Plus. You gotta raise it, because that's what's really killing them right now. But honestly, it's again, and the reservation system was supposed to solve all this stuff, but now we're here.
Yeah, and I don't really think there's, honestly, I don't think there's any easy answer to, at least, look, I've never been to Walt Disney World, but at Disneyland, I don't think there's really any silver bullet, easy answer to this problem. Because we've touched upon so many things here where it's I'm a big proponent of a lot of kind of stepping aside and letting people who haven't experienced this amazing place, and kind of let them do that, right?
Yeah. I have the same,
but there's a
same sensibilities.
Yeah, there's a balancing act, because a lot of Magic Key people, they're like, fuck it, I want my churro, man. I want my sipper. I don't give a shit if this person is they don't care. A lot of people don't care. Honestly, I don't need to go, 150 times a year. I'm sorry. I just don't. And it just, some people do. And, that's cool. That's on them. They want to do that. But I would much rather go less and allow people to enjoy the park. Go ahead, George.
Oh, no, I was just raising my hand to the fact of going 150 times a year.
Yeah. I mean, if I could get more access, I definitely would partake at least a little bit. But it's unfortunate that it's worked out this way. I've never seen quite such a onus placed on operational data or operational numbers at the parks ever. I was kind of in kind of a niche thing, I thought, but now it's really become apparent because of the systems they put in place. A lot of this has been, they've shot themselves in their own foot, so to speak, and have placed this onus on this kind of almost classist way of looking at the parks and this kind of operational reality that they have to contend with and stuff like this. The fact that we even have to talk about these numbers, we shouldn't have to. All this stuff should be not even a thought in your mind when you go. But now it is, and it shouldn't be that way. And, they talk about guest experience. They talk about, our guests love it and stuff. I can tell you they don't. They do not want to be doing this. It's just a lot of, brain overhead without as much maybe enjoyment as in previous years, and that's really unfortunate. It shouldn't be this way. These things shouldn't be at front of mind, but they are.
No, they shouldn't be. But here's the thing too, and look, I see it too. I see it a lot on social media, the fandom chatter. A lot of people are unhappy right now. How many of those people, though, realistically, let's do some real talk right now, how many of those people realistically, though, are not going to renew their Magic keys? You know what? Spoiler alert, most will probably renew.
Yeah.
And we're going to be in the same suit, and they're just going to renew. And, well, I renewed, but I'm still not happy. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem,
It's like a abused spouse.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And it's like, look, you got to vote with your wallet.
You have to.
You got to vote with your wallet. And people don't do that. People just sort of like they bitch on Twitter and they think that's enough. But it's not going to change anything. And here's the one thing. I will say this. One thing that I will have to kind of criticize the conservative movement a little bit on is and this is kind of off topic a little bit, but it's related to the parks. When Chapek said, I'm going to remain neutral, I'm not going to let Disney be a political football.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't say it once. He dug his heels in 2 and 3 times, basically on that stance. That's why the left was so mad. Remember?
I remember.
Remember that whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But did the conservatives come to Disney's side and say, hey, you know what? We stand with Disney. We're going to subscribe to Disney Plus. We're going to go to the parks. We're going to support Disney because they made the right call. They made the right call. They're going to be politically neutral, which is what we heard, that's what the conservatives want, politically neutral. They're going to come to Disney's side. They're going to buy into Disney because they took the right stance. We didn't see any of that. Instead, from the conservatives, I saw a bunch of, well, they deserve it. They deserve it. They were woke. The Ray Skywalker, and they were white, right? That was the thing. And that's the wrong approach, man. I'm telling you, if they're doing the right thing, let Chapek know they're doing the right thing. Why? There's no incentive for Disney to continue on that path if the conservatives aren't going to buy in. If the conservatives are going to still chastise Disney and the left is like, yeah, speak out. Why would Disney change course? They're not. You have to, it's a reward and punishment kind of system. It's vote with your wallet. If they're doing it right, give them your money. If they're not doing right, withhold your money. But the conservatives left out the part of the reward, giving the money thing. They just said, hey, you know what? They deserve it. And then the left was piling on saying, hey, they should speak out. So what incentive did Disney have on continuing that course? Nothing. They weren't getting anything from the conservatives. So they might as well capitulate to the left. And that's exactly what the fuck they did.
Well, I will say this, okay? I will say this. We don't know the effects of that because remember, right after Chapek said that, he balked. He changed his stance. And, so you already took what people would consider maybe a disenfranchised group, and now you're doubling down and saying, well, now we're just going to create the content that we want to create. F you kind of thing. Right. And a lot of conservatives took that the wrong way. I will say that the fact that there's political cachet for these politicians who are going after Disney in multiple ways, by the way, not just DeSantis. We're talking about Senator Josh Hawley, going after them for copyright protection. We're talking about, I believe a politician from Texas going after their no-fly zone restriction, right? The fact that these politicians believe that there's political cachet in what they're doing speaks a lot about maybe where conservatives are when it comes to Disney. And like I said, that family statistic that I talked about from Georgia, Disney's got to be, I would think, maybe be mindful of that. But we never really saw what you're talking about, OG, because they changed course so quickly, doubled down, and now we're on Fox News everywhere, kind of thing. And it was unfortunate how that happened. It shouldn't have happened. Will I think this, boycott or cancel Disney Plus, thing will work? I have my doubts. That's why they have a very diverse portfolio, Disney, so that you don't get away from them. So that no matter what you do, you're pretty much giving money to the mouse in some way, right? Indirectly or directly. But listen, I do agree. Vote with your wallet, vote with your feet. I mean, that's just the way you gotta, conduct yourself. And coming back to the parks a little bit, I see these people, like you said, OG. I see these people kind of just sign up and just see, you know what? What we went through was hell, but you know what? Give me another year. It's like, then nothing will change. If you accept it, you've now made Disney's content or Disney's actions acceptable.
Right.
That's what you've done if you accept it yourself. And so from Disney's point of view, why change if people are still showing up? Now that might change with a recession, and some of these investors on this call actually talked about the possibility of that in no uncertain terms, which was very unfortunate. We'll see how that goes. But for right now, if you don't like these monetization practices, if you don't like how the parks are being run, you're gonna have to vote for your feet or your wallets at some point.
No, 100%, 100%. And Chapek is more now than ever, you guys. I mean, I can't stress this enough. Bob Iger was not as data driven, is not as customer focused driven as Bob Chapek. Okay, Bob Chapek is very customer focused. If he sees the numbers going up or down in any direction, he's going to go in that direction. Wherever the money is, that's where Chapes is going to go. Vote with your wallet. It means more now and matters more now than ever. If you don't like Genie Plus, then don't fucking buy Genie Plus. Stop it. If you don't like what you're seeing on Disney Plus, then don't unsubscribe. Do what you got to do. Stop giving them your money. If you like it, buy into it, but you gotta vote with your wallet. That's the key thing here. Whether that's giving them your money or withholding your money, very important.
I think Netflix actually, they you know what? I think they learned this lesson recently. I don't know if you noticed.
They did. They learned it the hard way, but yeah, they did. And George, what do you think, man? Like voting with your wallet overall, where you stand on this, man?
Oh, absolutely. I've always been a big fan of that term, that if you really are unhappy or unsatisfied, you need to let Disney know, but where it hits them the most, and that's in the pocketbook. Yeah. You can't just, go on a rant on Twitter and then the next week you're back in the park. Disney's not going to care in that sense, that they don't take you seriously, because it's like, okay, they're getting their frustration out, but in all actuality, they're still giving us their money. So they don't care, So, I mean, if you do stop and it's like a big chunk of people and those numbers decline, guess what? You have Disney's undivided attention.
Right. And remember, Disney fans, what inspired and motivated Disney to renovate DCA? The money was drying up. People weren't going to DCA.
Yep.
That's the only reason we got Buena Vista Street. That's the only reason we got Cars Land. That's the only reason we got World of Color. All that stuff happened because people weren't spending their money at DCA. So if there's something you don't like, then vote with your wallet, because that's the best way to affect change. And a lot of times fans don't do that. I see a lot of complaining on Twitter about Genie Plus and this, that, and the other. And then Chapek comes out and says, yeah, we it's growing exponentially. People can't stop buying Genie Plus. It's like, well, come on, Diz Twitter, you're part of that. You are.
That wasn't like my case. I mean, do you know how disappointed I was to actually go to DCA and find out that I couldn't ride Superstar Limo? Yes.
I know. It's
exactly right. Look, OG, I think you earned a new nickname for yourself. I think we're going to call you Murphy, because you've been spitting out some hot fire. Right there. Come on. Okay. But no, I mean, you're right. It's why we got DCA, because, like you said, people weren't going. I mean, that's a classic example. And it just goes to show, if Disney, finds that there's an untapped market there, or that, that revenues quite not being optimized in terms of generation, they will go ahead and optimize that. We know one way or another.
Right.
And hey, I mean, maybe from all the talk of this quarterly earnings report, we talked about how they're spending like $30 billion towards their Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution division, right? It's crazy how much money is being foisted that way. But I think the Disney parks, I think they may have seen a realignment here, in terms of revenue generation and where this is coming from the parks exclusively, specifically. We saw before this quarterly earnings report, right on the eve of it, we saw a kind of a fluff piece from the trades about how, oh hey, look at how great Disney Parks is, guys. Look at this division over here. Look at how this generates profit as well, not just DTC. And I think the company is kind of looking at that and hey, we might see increased investment. That might be why we're seeing increased investment for the Parks division itself, and we haven't seen that for a long time. But I think Disney has kind of reevaluated it because people have voted with their feet. They want to go to the parks. Say, you know what, let's go ahead and invest in that.
Well, and especially with Disneyland in particular. I mean, we got like the newly redone for Downtown Disney, the Pixar Pier Hotel, the red car trolleys coming back, So I mean that's like quarter gras out of everything, So I mean, like, I think they're on like a fast track, especially because with Disneyland Forward, we're starting to see those small little things pop up here and there. And I mean, even with the numbers for this quarter earnings, I mean, it over doubled, more than doubled than what it was last year. What was it, 3.2 billion, and now it's 6.7 billion?
Something like that.
Right, and I wanted to talk about that for a little bit, George.
Let's do it.
It really is interesting how they went. They compared not quarter to quarter, but quarter to year. Where it's like, oh, we're going to go ahead and compare to Q2 of 2021, and it's like, well, that's interesting. Why do you think they would do that? Now, I went ahead and shared you something because I thought this was very interesting how they would do this. And as you can see right on your screen right there, where you're seeing the quarterly earnings report as it was detailed yesterday, right? And you're seeing all the numbers, and you can see right there for the Disney Parks Experiences and Products Division. Great name, by the way, Chapek. Thank you for that. We have about $6.6 billion for this quarter. Right? And you can see it right there. And it's like, that's interesting that they would compare to last year, not just the previous quarter. And the reason they did that, folks, well, if we look right here, quarter one of 2022, oh, look at that. Oh, it made a little bit more money that quarter. Well, isn't that interesting? Oh, why did revenues go down, Chapek? But nobody, unfortunately, answered that question. I think a lot of it had to do with Asia, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy actually bought out, and maybe operating costs as they increase, as they ramp up. But what do you guys have to say about this?
Well, I want to ask you, because I'm actually honestly not that familiar with a lot of the financials of all this stuff going. Do they not usually do year to year? Is it usually quarter to quarter?
It's usually quarter to quarter.
Usually in the financial world, you go quarter to quarter because, it's like, that's how it's all about the perception of growth, right? So, and you typically want to see quarter to quarter growth. From a revenue and operating standpoint, I mean, they did have a quarter where the parks were closed. You would never have previously seen that, so they could draw those comparisons with some maybe kind of financial glee and say, hey, look how much better we're doing now. And it's like, well, of course you're doing better now. First of all, you didn't have a lot of your parks open, for one, but for two, you launched these different revenue streams. But it's interesting, even with new revenue streams online in the form of Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser, with some of these Disney Cruise Lines running at full bore. with Lightning Lane and Genie Plus, all that stuff kind of, running in all cylinders, they didn't make quite as much. I just thought that was fascinating how they would do that. Now, obviously, there is the kind of the Asian problem to contend with, right? We're seeing out of China, they're locking down, they're locking down hard. And I wanted to go ahead and play this clip real fast because I thought Christine Wastelands McCarthy talked about it very, very interestingly. So let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, on international theme parks, Doug. On Asia, I think it's really too early for us to tell. And as you heard in my comments, we said that we could see a negative impact of Hong Kong and Shanghai of $350 million in the next quarter. So just keep that in mind. But it is a bit of a tale of two cities. I can give you some very positive trends we're seeing out of Disneyland Paris. So just like domestically, we're seeing very strong yield growth at Disneyland Paris, and we're looking forward to its continued recovery, particularly with the recent launch of their 30th anniversary celebration. Avengers Campus, that's the first new themed area of our multi-year expansion that we've talked about previously for DLP. That will open this summer. And what has already opened is one of our large hotels over there, the New York Hotel, has been rethemed in a Marvel theme, an Avengers theme. So that's very exciting, and our guests love staying there. So I think it's, what we're seeing in Paris gives me hope. Hope is not a strategy, but it gives me hope that our other parks in Asia will see that same rebound when their COVID-related headwinds abate.
Well, and that's actually kind of interesting because you and I had this discussion a couple of days ago when we were mentioning, despite of, your stance on whether you feel like, you need to wear a mask or social distance and what have you, that, Disney is at a point where there's no turning back on that. It's only moving forward. And, that'll show, whether it is international or domestic parks, for them to keep their quota, especially with the international parks right now, it's sort of like a back and forth sort of thing.
I heard from a source on the inside there that when they had kind of reversed the decision to get rid of masks completely and implemented a partial mask kind of stance, I guess there was a head of guest relations who said, when we get rid of the masks, we get rid of the masks for good. There is no way we turn back the clock on this. We don't go, with these big old large swings, because guest relations got hammered super hard when they backtracked a little bit right there. So I do agree with you, George. They're at a point of no return.
And that's what a lot of people were, saying, okay, I'm waiting to go to the parks when they lift the restrictions, when they lift this. So, and especially like if you already have a booking window and you're already locked in and you have your park reservations, you have your dining reservations. Oh, by the way, just so you know, the mask mandate's coming back. You're going to have a lot of unhappy guests.
From what I had heard, when those mask mandates went away and people booked vacations as a result, just to capitalize on what you were talking about, George. When they did that, and then they re-implemented those mask mandates, from what I understand, Disney had like a full-time team surrounding potential cancellations and getting people to rebook or to keep their bookings in place, because it was dire. They saw a massive pushback against that, and it was an ordeal, not just for frontline cast members at the actual resorts, but also for their telephone lines trying to keep people on board. Unfortunate.
Crazy. Hey, fellas, this was an incredibly interesting conversation today. We dove into a lot of stuff in regard to the financials, even dipped into a little politics, even some Dave Chappelle. We covered everything, and it was awesome. I absolutely loved it. I want to thank you both for coming back on as always. You guys are family here. You guys have a home here at OG55, and we're going to go ahead and close it out today, but we'll start off with Mr. Freshly Squeezed. If you can let everyone at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Well, hey, if you want to continue this discussion, but with me, you can go ahead and do that right there at Vash Sky as you see it right there. But please go ahead, leave a comment below. Tell us what you think. I mean, we had some pretty good back and forth here. I thought this was a pretty engaging show. I thought it was pretty cool. This is a pretty good one. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now, Orange Go 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Yes. And down below, we got Mr. DFM23, host of Citrus Corner, our Walt Disney World aficionado here on the channel. George, if you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. And as OG had mentioned, you can find me on his channel, Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner. And I'm going to echo what Mr. Vash Sky said. Please leave a comment down below of anything that we had discussed today, questions, comments, concerns. And I actually have a subject matter for all of you watching today. If you could write down in the comments of how many times Mr. Vash Sky has said Christine Waistlines McCarthy. Write that in the descriptions of the number of times that he had mentioned it. I'd really like to see who.
I'd really want to see this.
we got to add a banner to that, man. We got to add a banner and an alert sound for her. We'll figure it out. We'll work on that.
What? Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll do it. We'll do it. I was gonna do the robust one, but I will still do the robust one. But we'll go ahead and work that out behind the scenes. I think that would be pretty fun. But yes, please follow George's advice. Let me know, because that's a very interesting one for sure.
Yep, 100%. Thank you both for coming on, and thank you all for watching for my 1 hour and 55-minute crew. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much for sticking with us. This has been a 2-hour video.
Oops,
and it's been fantastic. But comment down below, like, subscribe, share the video if you can, please. We do appreciate it. Matthew Murr, huge shout out to Matthew Murr, huge subscriber. I'm a huge supporter of the channel, and we do appreciate you, sir. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.